So as promised, here we are with the table on opportunities for scaling up climate action, feasibility of climate responses and adaptation, and potential of mitigation options in the near term. Remember, this section 4 is on near-term climate action and responses. So in the energy system, you are looking at climate responses and adaptation. So you have potential feasibility up to 1.5 degrees C target, synergies with mitigation here, and mitigation options. So options costing $100 ton of CO2 equivalent or less could reduce global emissions at least half of the 2019 level by 2030. So this tells you what is the potential of reducing emissions by 2030, which is the near-term horizon for considering near-term action. Energy liability, for example, diversification, access, and stability. So these are again the keys here. Again, are looking at high, medium, and low in color, with darker to lighter colors, and 3 dots to 1 dot goes from high, medium to low in terms of confidence level in potential feasibility in and in synergies with mitigation. Here the colors are about feasibility level and synergies with mitigation. So everything is combined together here. Dark colors and 3 dots always good. So a lot of good things here. Resilient power system, improve water use efficiency, lower confidence, but synergies with mitigation is also lower in this case in terms of water use efficiency. Mitigation options, potential contribution to net emissions reductions by 2030 in gigaton CO2 equivalent per year. Solar obviously has good potential to contribute, and the colors here, net lifetime cost of options, costs lower than the reference value, which is some baseline chosen, 0 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 200 in terms of US dollars per ton of CO2 equivalent, and cost is not allocated in the gray cases, and here evidence is not available. It's a light color if it's a light color. So wind, good high potential with low costs, reduce. So if you want to increase more in terms of net emissions reductions, you have to spend more essentially. Okay, same goes for wind. Reduce methane from coal, oil, and gas, has a low blue color, so costs are lower than reference, but then costs keep going up when you want to increase the potential. Similarly for BECCS, basically has no reference cost because it hasn't started at scale yet. Similarly for geothermal and hydropower, nuclear has some baseline, but you can see the costs are relatively high and the potential is low. Doesn't mean that you only choose the ones with high potential. It just means that you will have a portfolio where everybody will play, all these portfolio items and mitigation options will play a role, and each one may have a different, like geothermal and hydropower geothermal may work very well for Iceland, Japan, and so on. Hydropower may work well for Switzerland, for example, or China and India, and nuclear is acceptable much more for the French, but the French are now facing severe drought with no water availability for nuclear plants, for example. So all these things are some things we have to worry about in terms of perturbations and cascading events and risks. Fossil carbon capture and storage, CCS, baseline reference cost is not available in terms of cost being lower than that, but you can see that the potential is low and the costs jump up very quickly as you want higher numbers. Looking similarly at land, water, and food, settlements and infrastructure and health, you have various levels of confidence and feasibility of mitigation and adaptation. So this includes efficient livestock systems, improved cropland management, water use efficiency, water resource management, biodiversity management, and ecosystem connectivity, agroforestry, coastal defense and hardening. In settlement and infrastructure, you have sustainable urban water management, green infrastructure, and ecosystem services. Under health, you have health enhanced health services, nutrition, diets, and so on. And in the mitigation options here, you have continuing with reduced conversion of natural systems, carbon sequestration in agriculture, increasing also soil carbon as a co-benefit, ecosystem restoration and afforestation and reforestation, reduce food loss and waste. It doesn't have much data there. Similarly, shift to sustainable healthy diets, but you can see that in mitigation options in this sector you have efficient buildings, fuel efficient vehicles, electric vehicles, efficient lighting, appliances and equipment which have high implementation mitigation potential. In health you have avoiding demand for energy services, onset renewables and so on. This is still now going into industry and waste, and here society and livelihood and economy. So this is risk spreading and sharing, social safety nets, climate services including early warning systems, which I like because this has immediate applications of dealing with what is happening already in terms of extreme events, health impacts, managing energy intermittency, etc. And disaster risk management is important, of course, and human migrations. So feasibility level and synergies are largely medium and low in these cases, with confidence level in potential feasibility and synergy with mitigation is also a little bit low, but some of them are high here when you look at the synergies with mitigation and so on. So sorry for flipping back and forth. I just want to make sure you see the headers there. So this is in industry and waste. You have fuel switching, reduce emission and of fluorinated gases, energy efficiency, material efficiency, reduce methane from waste and wastewater, construction material substitution, enhanced recycling and carbon capture with utilization or carbon capture and sequestration. So the costs are estimates, so obviously there will be uncertainties in those, but if you look at potential of demand side mitigation options by 2050, where will they come from? So the range of greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential is 40 to 70% in these end use sectors. Will there be a bottom-up demand or demand side mitigation option for food? So here you are going from additional electrification, let's see the percentages here. So in terms of gigaton CO2 equivalent per year mitigation mitigation potential and option from the demand side for food is 44% and can be as low as just about 5%. And if you look at the key here, it's total emissions for 2050 and percentage of possible reduction from the 2050 due to demand side mitigation potential and the upside of the mitigation potential. So you start here at 100% for food in 2050 is somewhere here in the 18 gigaton CO2 equivalent per year, and you can reduce it till here in terms of possible reduction from the demand side mitigation, and the potential range here is shown as a percentile across here. So it has theoretically very high potential. For example, land transport has a 67% reduction potential. Emission is in the order of 6 or so gigaton CO2 equivalent per year by 2050. Buildings have a 66% potential. Industry lower, 29%, and their emission is the highest here, actually lower than the food. But electricity, additional electrification can add another 60% potential here. 73% reduction before additional electrification can occur from demand side mitigation potential. So just keep those in mind, and we already read these. Let's look at the remaining statements. Governance and policy for near-term climate change action. Effective climate action requires political commitment, well-aligned multi-level governance, and institutional frameworks, laws, policies, and strategies. It needs clear goals, adequate finance and financing tools, coordination across multiple policy domains, and inclusive governance processes. Many mitigation and adaptation policy instruments have been deployed successfully and could support deep emissions reductions and climate resilience if scaled up and applied widely, depending on national circumstances. Adaptation and mitigation action benefits from drawing on devices of knowledge. On diverse adaptation and mitigation actions benefit action. Adaptation and mitigation action benefits from drawing on diverse knowledge, which we know with high confidence. Sorry about mucking that up. Strengthening the response. Finance, international cooperation, and technology. Finance, international cooperation, and technology are critical enablers for accelerated climate action. If climate goals are to be achieved, both adaptation and mitigation financing would have to increase many-fold. There is sufficient global capital to close the global investment gaps, but there are barriers to redirect capital to climate action. The US is experiencing this already. Barriers include institutional, regulatory, and market access barriers are reduced and address the needs and opportunities, economic vulnerability, and indebtedness in many developing countries. Enhancing international cooperation is possible through multiple channels. Enhancing technology innovation systems is key to accelerate widespread adoption of technologies and practices, which is again stated with high confidence. So all this hopefully helps in terms of near-term climate action. Higher mitigation investment flows required for all sectors and regions to limit global warming. I won't go through the details here, but you can see yearly mitigation investment flows in US dollars per year pegged to 2015 value. From 2017 to 2020, they have gone up in number, total amount, and IEA data for 2017 to 2020 is also shown in this case here. For example, average flows and annual mitigation investment needs. So you can think of the gaps, for example. So these are looked at by sector, by type of economy, and by region. Everywhere there is huge gaps in terms of annual mitigation investment needs averaged until 2030. Okay, so energy efficiency, the average of 2017 to 2020, transport, electricity, agriculture, forestry, and other land use. So in terms of multiplication factors, so these are multiplication factors indicating the x-fold increase between yearly mitigation flows to average yearly mitigation investment needs. So that's how much they have to jump. Globally, current mitigation financial flows are a factor of 3 to 6 below the average levels up to 2030. So many of them have to jump at least 2 times, maybe up to 7 times. Here, for example, AFOLU, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, the lower range of multiplication factor is 10 and the upper range is at 31. Similarly, by region, you can see that Eastern Asia, North America, Europe, Southern Asia, and so on down to the Middle East, you have annual average flows needed have to jump by 14 times in the lower range and 28 times in the upper range. So obviously higher mitigation investment flows are required for all sectors and regions to limit global warming. So all the financial tools, policies, and financial systems are needed to make this happen. Integration of near-term actions across sectors and systems. The feasibility, effectiveness, and benefits of mitigation and adaptation actions are increased when multi-sectoral solutions are undertaken that cut across systems. When such options are combined with broader sustainable development objectives, they can yield greater benefits for human well-being, social equity and justice, and ecosystem and planetary health, which is said with high confidence. Okay, so these are obviously statements of what is needed, and there is a lot of good news on where we are headed, and then there is the bad news in terms of not getting there fast enough, or not having enough finance, or not having the policy tools, or not the nationally determined contributions not being sufficient to meet the global warming targets and so on. So it's always a good news, bad news kind of story, but having the pathway and the gaps understood in terms of emissions, but also in terms of financial needs for adaptation, mitigation, sectoral emissions reductions needed, and so on, are all part of this synthesis report, which I've tried to summarize briefly here. But one should obviously go to the original report and read the details if you do need more details in particular aspect of this brief summary I have provided here. Okay, I will leave this total summary of the 2023 report here for now.